Shulodd and hello, Zel Amals. I am Matthew Carauddo, author and developer of Diamond Dragons, and today we chat with varying artists, our diamonds in the rough. Today, our diamond in the rough is Milt Bighley. Milt, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matthew, thank you so very much for having me.
Glad that we have yet another voice actor on here. I always love being able to have artists on the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the kind of journey that you've had over your artist career.
Well, I actually started that journey right out of high school, which was more years ago than I care to count. But yeah, I went into radio broadcasting right out of high school. Did that for about 3.5 years and then realized that I needed to get a real job because I had a family on the way, needed to make some money to be able to support those. So I got out of radio, did several different things. But the best stretch in there is I spent about 10 years doing professional youth ministry in a congregational setting.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That was not only the chance to lead people to Christ and share the gospel and minister and all those kinds of things, but it was also a real tangible way to be able to use some of those artistic skills. Because who wants to sit and listen to a sermon that kind of goes like it's just kind of boring.
You applied like storytelling and that kind of capturing the audience's minds and spirits in the sense that an actor or someone engaging with them would. Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. Yeah, it's for me, the goal was always, so we're going to be telling this story out of the Bible. How do we make it come to life? And one of the greatest things that I was able to do during that stretch, and when I say greatest, I'm saying greatest for me, because it's my perspective, is if you're in the Christian faith, you know that one of our big times of year is Lent. Lent is the time where we're getting ready for Holy Week, crucifixion of Christ, and the resurrection on Easter Sunday. And one of the big days in there is what we call Good Friday, which is the day that Jesus was nailed to the cross and died.
Right.
And there was a period of about 7 years where on Good Friday morning, early in the morning, like 7 a.m., we would have a service that I was leading that was always some kind of drama. And so I was able to portray different characters from the biblical story of Jesus' life and Holy Week and the things that led him to the cross.
Excellent. This reminds me of something that I learned actually in college during studying acting. What one of my instructors talked about, even in Latin, like you might be familiar, right? There's this thing, quem quaeritis, that they used to do, and it was sort of this one of the earliest versions of doing like performances. And they basically, it's he is risen is what I think this quem quaeritis meant in Latin. And so they would do these performances, and it kind of like harkens all the way back to like when was the first performances. It's probably not the only one, but like maybe these were some of the only ones of any magnitude where they were shown to great audiences and not just a story around the campfire, which is, of course, when we think about storytelling and how far it goes back and how pivotal it is in all of our lives. We look to those things, like there was the story of, you ever heard of this medieval morality play, Everyman? No? It's
not
okay.
ringing any bells right now.
Oh, it's no big deal, but like here's the thing. Everyman is basically this story of a guy who needs to make his peace with God, and because death is coming, and they make all these personifications, and so then he has to go and visit his the people in his life, or rather they're kind of named fellowship and beauty and all these kinds of things, and he has to make reckoning with all these things. And what they go through this medieval morality play to kind of show that you know, he was decadent. All he cared about was his stuff, and he wanted to remain handsome forever and all these things. And he finally had to realize that none of these things will come with him when he dies. And so Death had all these, you know, Death was an actual character. And I got a chance in college to actually direct a one act. And I convinced my instructors that I would do this thing because we wouldn't have to pay the rights, because this medieval morality play not only was extremely old, but also no one really knew who was the writer of it. In fact, it's still to this day everyman, and people can look this up if they wanted to, medieval morality play. It's credited to Anonymous because nobody really knows. But I found it terribly interesting because, again, it was this reckoning of a person who, you know, now knew that, you know, Death basically walks in the door and he goes like, okay, it's time. You have a few days, and then it's all over, son. He's like, no, but I have all these, and I went. And he's like, I don't want to hear it. It's time. Get yourself ready, because big man, he's got some questions. So I found it to be terribly interesting, but I think he would resonate with it. Not to mention this Quaritas thing, the rising, he has risen thing. There's some indication that it may be one of the most early performances that was put on to educate people and to also entertain them. And they literally like put Christ in a box, you know, an actor to do it, and then they'd close the door, and then he'd, you know, disappear, kind of like a magic trick. And then it was like, oh, he's gone, and then he would come out and he would be healed. And it was like one of the earliest performance stories. So it's just a very interesting thing. I thought you'd get a kick out of it.
It sounds like a great story. I'm gonna have to check that one out when we're done.
Yeah. So tell us more about your you know, your work then. So since you said you got kind of started in radio, but then you kind of did this normal job, or not normal job, but like you realize, hey, I have to pay some bills. How did you then kind of gravitate back into voiceover and make that really like, you know, your serious career and everything?
Well, so getting back into voiceover, I've been on that journey now for probably 6 or 7 years now, and it really started out part-time. Yeah, I'm at that stage of life where, you know, retirement is looming and kind of just around the corner, and my wife and I have been blessed, and she was able to retire early. And I always called it, I went into semi-retirement because I got this voiceover thing started that I really want to stick with. So I've been kind of focusing on that now solely for the last couple of years. And just, you know, I'm not putting pressure on myself with it to make tons of money, because I'm at that stage that I don't need to make tons of money. Do I want to make some money? Yeah, that's always nice. Pays for the equipment, the upgrades to the microphone, the interface, all of that kind of thing, which is, it's amazing the equipment that you have to have. I mean, this isn't something that, you know, I've heard even online with some training things, get into voiceover, it's easy, all you need to do is buy a $20 USB mic, and it doesn't work that way. You know, because you have to put, you know, a decent amount of money into equipment. You're not talking break the bank, but, you know, probably $1,000 anyway to get started. And then you have to find coaching, because no matter how good your voice is, and I always thought I had a really good voice, no matter how good that is, you got to have coaching to make this voiceover thing work. And then there's the performance coaching, which is the acting part of the whole thing. But there's also the technical aspect. It's, how do I edit audio files? Right? I mean, what program do I have to have? What things do I need to be looking for? What do I need to do? You know, and so there's that, and then there's the business side. how do I get people to know who I am? How do I get work? How do I find? One of the big things that I've gravitated to is narrating audiobooks. I've gotten to read a lot of good books, and have gotten paid to read a lot of good books. And everybody says, "Oh, that just sounds like so much fun. You just sit down, record it, and you're done." No, no, it really isn't, because first you got to read the story so you know what's going on, right?
Right. Yeah, it's tough to cold read an entire book.
It is, because there's words in there that you have never pronounced before that you have to find.
And more importantly, ones that you put together. Have you ever, tripped up so much on a sentence that you're like, God, what is it about? I know these words, but when I say them together, I'm just like, so then Milt down, let me start again. So then Milt, I'm starting again. So then, and you're like, what is wrong with the syllables,
And a lot of times it's one word that hangs you up.
Of course.
Today on Diamond Dragon,
exactly.
Right? I mean, you can't even get the simple basic stuff out, and it just happens.
Exactly. I completely resonate, even though I haven't done a ton of professional work. I do my own voice work for a lot of different projects. Like, for example, I don't want to say I just got finished doing it, but they're fairly recent. Like, I'm a big fan of Carl Sagan. And so I wanted to do some homages to some of his work. I didn't know what I was going to start with because, of course, Carl Sagan and Cosmos, he's done just a giant amount of work, more so than most people would even think for a scientist / philosopher, right? He almost had to bleed over into kind of acting. I mean, not that Carl Sagan was an actor, but the point being is he has a huge amount of voiceover work and these videos of explaining science. So, but I chose to do both Pale Blue Dot, makes sense, and Humility. And I found a lot of fun in doing them, but at the same time, I was really specific about how I wanted to approach them. And I have a feeling that a lot of people maybe just think, oh, well, that must be easy. You just get the script and then you just press record and go. And I'm like, well, not really. There's this idea of communicating emotional content through the microphone, and it's just, I'm sure you completely resonate, Milt, that it's something that we can't really explain to someone who doesn't have any foot in the artist's store. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In other words, if you try to explain to someone who just builds, like a carpenter, not saying anything bad about that, I'm just saying is they won't understand. They'll just look at an actor and be like, oh, it must be so easy to just get up on screen and pretend to fire guns at people, or it must be so easy to go up there and read lines. And you're like, it's nothing so banal nor, casual,
Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing with audiobooks. And there's different timelines that different people will give you. For me, for an audiobook, that one finished hour of book that you listen to,
right,
is going to take 6 hours to produce, at least, if you count everything in there. Because you've got, like I said, you're reading the book, you have to develop the characters, you have to develop the character voices, you have to take a deep voice like mine and really try to talk like a woman for some of these,
right,
which can be challenging.
Yeah, and sometimes, right, as you know, is if you're not careful, it could be insulting to some extent if the material in those moments are very serious. Like, for example, say something was extremely serious matter, and here's maybe a girl imitating a guy's voice, or here's maybe a male imitating a woman's voice. You have to be very judicious about whether or not you're going to go there, because you might say, man, people are going to read this and they're not supposed to be either laughing or going like, what is this guy all about, when the scene might be something just absolutely harrowing, like a murder or abuse or something. You just never know. So I'm sure you've run into that before, and I don't know how you would deal with it, but right, like, people don't consider the the gravity that some of the things that
Right.
you go through are all about. They just think, turn on the microphone, record. How hard could it be? Just read a whole bunch
Yep.
of words, and you're like, yeah, it's slightly, just a little bit more difficult than that.
Right. Yeah. Just a wee little bit. But there's a lot of pieces that go into it. It's fun, it's challenging, and yet it's frustrating at the same time. You know, this business, it's all about auditioning. And, you know, they say, they being, you know, the coaches and experts and whatever, that as an artist, a voiceover artist, you audition 100 times before you get one part.
If that, in some cases, I would even say that,
yeah,
right, it's possible that you could audition 500 times and maybe not get anything. And on that note, I just want to say this to artists out there is like, so it's not a reflection on whether you're good or not all the time. I mean, sure, sometimes you won't get cast in something because you're not prepared. That's fine. But let's put that aside and let's just say that everybody auditioning is pretty excellent. Everybody auditioning is astute. Every person auditioning has talent. It's not a reflection that if you don't get the role simply because of numbers. It's just the way it is. So I hope people understand that. And it's so difficult to go through that mindset because after being refused so many times in a row, you start to look at it like, it's not a conspiracy, but you know, you're thinking maybe I do really suck, and it's possible that maybe the audition materials are not right. Maybe the audition materials are not that good. Maybe your approach is not good. But it's like, what if we put all that aside and said let's pretend you were Al Pacino and you were auditioning for things before you were Al Pacino, but you were still good. You might not get cast, and you'd wonder why. And there's like, I remember there was an auditor that I studied they had written some articles, and I later taught some of this to young actors where they were like, I've been an auditor. Oh, and I should clarify for the audience, I don't mean auditor like taxes. I mean like they were a professional auditioner, you know, where they'd sit and watch people come in for whatever it was, and companies would hire them to get the right people for the right roles. Anyways, mostly theatrical. But anyways, this guy just said flat out simply, like one of the best things he ever said was, you will almost never know why or why not you were cast for something. You know, he's like, you could even ask, they might not tell you, but he's like, for example, what if we were doing Taming of the Shrew and we had Kate at 6'3", and then oh gosh, I forget the name of the male lead. I should know it. I forget. But anyways, what if the male lead was 5'4"? It's probably not going to work. You know what I mean? Hollywood style, you don't normally have a male lead who is extremely short where the female lead is extremely tall. So what if they were both excellent actors? What if they both had excellent chemistry? They might not be cast in that show. And people would maybe not know that because, of course, you just wouldn't get the role. And you might think, but I nailed it. I did so well. What in the world? Why wouldn't I get this? And you might not have known, oh, they were considering this other person opposite me, and we just do not match for X amount of reasons. And I think people will not know that. Same thing with voice acting, and I'm sure you understand that, right, Milt? Is you might have a great voice, but then it's possible that all the other voices they might cast alongside all the characters, somehow your voice stands out in a way that is not good for the way that the directors or the producers want to envision the work, and they go like, man, Milt's voice is really great, or Matthew's voice is great, or Bob's or Samantha's voice is great, but I don't think we can cast them here because they don't fit in with the rest of the characters. I don't know why, but here we are today, right? What do you think of that?
Right. Well, there's that, because your voice, my voice, anybody's voice does not fit every project, and so you're dead on with that one. I think another one of the big reasons along that same line, though, is, hey, Milt has a great voice, Matthew has a great voice, I love them both. Which one do I choose?
Absolutely.
Right, and that I have run into that. I had a book that I had auditioned for that I didn't get, and then a year later, this same organization reaches out to me and says, we'd like you to do our book. And I get that in a message of, you auditioned for this book, yada yada. Wait a minute, I never auditioned for that book. Where's this coming from? Oh, but you did this one about a year ago and it was really close and you were our number 2 and we wanted to offer you this book. So you run into that a lot.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense too, because like I always look at it like this, and I don't know if this will help any of the audience members out there because it depends on what they're watching for. But for example, I always try to put myself in the reverse situation. In other words, if I'm auditioning for something, it doesn't matter. Let's say it's acting, let's say it's VO, but it doesn't matter. I'm trying to get the work. I try to think, if I was not me and I was them, would I cast me? You know what I mean? I'm like,
yep.
Do I sound like the right thing? And then even if I'm thinking yes, I also try to think, and I'm like, but there might be other things afoot. That just kind of like what I was just saying a minute ago too. So, and part of it is that I've been in that situation. Like even for Diamond Dragons, I've brought aboard some people as voice actors, and that means I also summarily had to turn down other people, or not necessarily even turn down, but just not go with them because maybe someone fit the role better or whatever the situation was.
Right.
So I completely resonate. And in many cases, even when I think back to casting for this, even simplistic, my pre-visualization that people can find on the channel or whatever, it wasn't always because the voices were bad that I didn't use them. It was just because maybe the role already became cast, or I liked this voice better than this one, or like I said, even more specifically, there were some where I was like, oh, I really like this guy's voice, but it didn't fit with a lot of the other cast members, or at least people I was considering, and so the shaping of how all the vocals went, it didn't work as well. But that said, I was like, I remember going back to some of those people and being like, hey, how's it going? Like, how's your work been and everything? Because I was interested not only in them as a person, but because of their talents. Like, I genuinely want to know more about artists. I don't want them to think that just because we don't work together on something, it means that it invalidates them as a human being. That makes no sense. Like that is not what that's not what I'm about. That is not what I'm about. You know what I mean?
It was actually when you were doing the Diamond Dragons that you and I first connected.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because I was going, hey, I do audiobooks. You got Diamond Dragons, and you were casting for it. And yeah, I mean, that was one of those things that just didn't work. And here we are. We still like each other.
Well, it's not even that it didn't work too, Milt. It's just like, I think by the time that I had listened to your work or whatever, like I had cast the roles that would have worked with the type of voice that you were offering.
Right.
And in fact, earlier, which people won't know because we were talking off camera about this, I was talking about one of those guys to Milt, because he's really awesome, and I'll have to tell you about him later on. He's actually going to be a guest on the show at one point. But yeah, like exactly, like sometimes you find yourself in a situation and then you just realize, oh, whoa, there's all these other people aboard, and it just always makes me think too. People don't think about what happens if they're a casting director. Like, for example, if you're a casting director and you have 5 roles to fill, and let's say this is for a big Hollywood production, chances are you're going to get thousands of entries. Maybe not, but just doing statistics alone, because some people say, that's impossible. How could it be so many? I'm like, just do the math. Go look up the data and you'll find out averages on what happens when a big role comes up for just whatever. But the point is, let's just say there is only 1,000 entries, which I have to say, I think that is being ridiculously conservative. Let's be honest, right, Milt? If 1,000 people auditioned for you, Milt, let's say you were casting something, Milt, right? And now you had 5 roles to fill. You almost have to start being completely random, right? You almost have to now start saying, okay, I like these people's work, etc. But at a certain point, you've narrowed it down from 1,000 to 100. Now what? You go like, they're all, like you said, they're all really good. What do? I feel terrible. But then you almost have to start flipping coins or doing something almost ridiculous, because you'd be like, here, we could cast this person. They are excellent. They fit with everybody else. They are a professional. They are fantastic. And over here, we also have someone who is almost identical, but different in their own unique artist way. Who do we cast? And they go like, you know what, Bob, I don't know. You're going to have to make that call, but
Yep.
I like them both. I trust your judgment. I'm going to lunch. I need the decision in an hour. And that's another thing that people don't consider is, things move at time frames and people have deadlines. And so, sometimes it's even that they're like, we had a deadline, we cast this immediately. The first 100 entries are the only ones we looked at, and the other 900, we didn't get there. I'm sorry. I am sorry. And you might be like, yeah, but the 900th entry was your ace in the hole. They would have been way more than perfect. And you're like, we didn't see them. We didn't have time. And nobody ever thinks of that. They always think of, well, I auditioned for this and I would have been perfect. And it's like, maybe you would have, but you don't know if they made the decision before even seeing a frame of you or hearing a bite of your sound, So,
well, the artist thinks they would have been perfect.
That too.
I tell you though, I mean, I've done auditions that I've gotten done, I've submitted and went, I nailed that. I've got to get that book. There's no way they can't give it to me. And 24 hours later, they've already given it to somebody else. and then there's the ones that you audition for that you're going, I probably shouldn't even send this off because it sucks. I wouldn't hire me, so why would they? But it's like, well, I did it, so you send it off anyway. And lo and behold, that's the one that you get.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like,
and there's just no rhyme or reason to, from the actor's perspective, if you don't put on those full picture glasses, there's just not a lot of rhyme or reason to why did I get this one and not that one,
right? Exactly.
All of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, again, it harkens back to this thing that I wish I remember this auditor's name, but I did this workshop and I read all these articles like 20 years ago. So I don't remember his name. I didn't even keep the article. I mean, I kept it on all my computers as I kept upgrading, and then you know how information goes away. But exactly, he basically was touting you will almost never know why or why not you were cast for something. And that's why it's also, I feel, difficult for actors to decide sometimes what to audition for, which I know that most people will say you should audition for everything you can possibly sink your claws into, but I feel like it's sort of that, but not. Like, in other words, you should audition for things that definitely harken to you and your brand and your feel and all that, but you should also step outside that to some extent. But yeah, like, I don't think everybody should audition for absolutely everything, because then it's possible that you'll get cast in something that you don't even come close to resonating with, and you feel like you'd almost be a detriment to the project. And again, I'm talking about some very fringe things. Mostly I would say, yeah, audition for nearly everything, but I have also seen times where people will audition for things where I'm like, why are you wasting your time with this kind of thing? Like, you're putting so much effort into this thing that probably isn't going to do you any good also as a performer. You're kind of going to just be fodder, possibly, like where, you might audition for something where it's such a minor role, but your abilities are so much more that you'd be like, that would be better in the hands of some young 18 or 20-year-old who could fulfill on that, just like you could fulfill on it. But it's like, it's not a great usage of your time anymore, So there's that kind of, I feel, careful balance of, like, I don't believe in the shotgun approach where it's just like audition for everything. I think it goes too far.
And you also run the risk, the very real risk of when you're doing that you become basically what I think of as an audition mill. All you're doing is putting out audition after audition after audition, and it's not your best work because you've got too many auditions to do. You have to get them done. You can't stop and give it the extra, few minutes that it deserves to really give it your best shot. And
I completely agree.
In the performance business, whether it's voiceover, actor, whatever, and I think this holds true even in the quote unquote normal life of people going out to get a job and all of those kinds of things.
It's true.
If you go into the interview, which is what our auditions are for performers, is the job interview, and you're not putting your best foot forward, what's the chance you're going to get the job? Zip.
Right.
You know, if you're interviewing for a professional position and you show up to the interview wearing holey blue jeans, dirty shoes, and a jean jacket, you're not going to get it.
Right. Not to mention that that just goes to, that harkens back to, like, because that's your clothes, and, you know, it's possible that maybe that would actually be appropriate depending, but I know what you're saying, which is be prepared. Like, if people are so overwhelmed by auditioning for everything, it almost feels like, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I think a quick assessment, you'd be like, how prepared are you for all of those auditions? Be honest with yourself. And if the answer is anything other than they're like, I prepare for every single one of them, and I put the work in, and I know there's a lot, but like, man, then you'd be like, okay, I got it. But I feel like, you know, most of the time, if you really are putting the preparation in and the connection to the character or whatever it is you're going to do, you're not just going to do that spray and pray approach with it. It just makes no sense. And like I said, I feel like it's a waste of time. And it's kind of funny we talk about time here, because that is one of the main, whoops, I'm using the wrong hand here, the main aspects of Diamond Dragons that I've embedded in the story, which is the tagline, which is hard for people to read here, is time is the only resource for which no creature may bargain. And we all know it's true that we're always running out of it. You can only do so much with it, but you can't get any of it back. I can't invest money and give me more time on the earth or whatever. And so it's kind of like, well, what are you doing with your time when you audition? Are you using it wisely? Do you think that these people will appreciate you if you get cast? Do you think you'll appreciate them? That's another thing. It's so easy for actors to think, oh, I would be so good at this. Da, 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 da. I'm like, right, maybe, but like, what do you have to offer them? Like, remember, they are in the business of making money. Like, they want to turn a profit. Like, can they trust you? How do they know? How do they know they can trust you? And if you can't answer, here's all the reasons why I know, and you're like, that's true, there's nothing proving that I am a trustable human being with this project, they're not going to want to step outside their house for that, because they could get killed. Right? What if you don't come through? Then they got to start all over again because you bailed on them, or you didn't deliver, or you were late every time for whatever. You know what I mean? No one's going to want to deal with that. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really consider. They always want to think about, oh, I'm going to be a star, I'm going to be awesome. I'm like, really? Can you come through for all these other human beings? Can you make them feel like you have this particular aspect taken care of? Because really, that's what it gets down to, right? You got to have the lighting guy that you go, oh, we trust Bill. Bill's great. And they go, why is that? Like, every time I have a lighting thing, he's already got it in the. I never have to worry. Sound, we're good with sound because this guy's got it. And then we hire Milt. I don't even have to think about it. I'm asleep. I sleep like a baby. They go, why? They're like, because I trust Milt's voice. I trust his work. He is never late. He never under-delivers, ever. And da-da-da-da-da-da. Like, you want that from people's, thought process. You don't want them going, oh, man, I don't know about that Matthew guy. And they go, why is that? Well, dude, he was like late like 5 times, and he put up a big fuss about this, that, and the other. Like, I'm worried, man. I'm worried that he's not going to come through for us. And they're like, really? Should we cast him again? And they go, no, I don't think we should. Right. Bad stuff, right? You don't want that. Yep. Yeah. So very interesting.
And with voiceover and that end of acting, customer service becomes a huge role. It's, you get a client to do whatever for, and they come back to you and say, well, everything is great, but there's this one part right here that we just need to have you change to, sound more like this. Well, it's how you respond to that and do that and take care of that.
Right.
That has a large determination too, whether or not you get them back, because that customer service piece is part of how much do I trust you?
Exactly.
Do I trust Milt to the point that I can go to sleep at night because I know that even if, you know, he doesn't get something quite the way I want it, he's going to go back and change it and it's not going to be a problem? Yeah. And that's a huge piece of it. With voice actors, most of us, and there are exceptions when you get into, you know, the big corporate stuff and commercial stuff and whatever, but most voice actors are self-directed, they're self-produced, they're self-edited, and you're making all the decisions on what you're giving out to the client.
Yeah.
Well, if I come up with a dragon voice for Matthew that sounds like this because I'm a really cute dragon, but what he really wants is, I'm a dragon, right? I mean, two totally different things. And, you know, and that's back to the concept of the audition again, because if we're doing the book, you can tell me that before I do it, right?
Exactly.
In an audition, we just get, you know, 1,000 words to read.
Exactly. And
you know, a little bit of a background, but no context of how it's in the story. And so we try to come up with that thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think it varies. Like, I mean, for example, again, I am not, you know, some Hollywood mogul when I'm running this kind of, you know, thing here, the book and with Diamond Dragons and, of course, the screenplay, which, of course, I, you know, kind of proselyted out to the, you know, voice actors communities and just said, hey, I'm auditioning these things. But I also, as a performer and a director and someone who is well steeped in putting my own productions together, I knew that I wanted to tell everybody as best as I could about these roles before they audition. And I feel like it's definitely a good hybrid. Like it's terrible for someone to just be like, here's the character name, show me something, show me something, show me something. They'll be like, how old are they? And I don't know, whatever, show me something. And you're like, okay, are they muscular? Like, or are they weak physically? I don't know, show me something. And you're sort of like, okay, then the problem is you're almost then being very random, and then maybe they won't be satisfied because they haven't communicated what it is that they really truly need. So I felt like, at least for me, I tried my best to cordon people off in certain ways, but also allow them the freedom as an artist to be free. Now, I'll give you an example. Two of the dragons in the story are oceanic sisters. They're the sea sisters, and they're kind of wonderful characters, and they're very majestic and mystical and mysterious. I had a young lady audition, and she was literally Scottish, and she had the most beautiful voice. I remember telling her, I was like, your voice is like poetry and honey and silk on the wind. I love it. And then she's like, oh, that's great. And, you know, we were talking and I was like, I want to, you know, maybe ask you to do this and da-da-da. And then finally it dawned on me. I said, you know, it just dawned on me. She's like, what's that? I'm like, I guess I almost now have to make sure to cast someone who is also Scottish or can provide a very competent and almost equivalent Scottish accent that will be matching with yours for the sister character. And it never really occurred to me that the sisters would be Scottish, but because this actress auditioned, it was a strong voice, it felt great, and it was a good match. I sort of allowed myself to gravitate and see in my mind and be like, well, what if we went that way? What if we made it that way? I like that. Let's see if I can gravitate. And for me, again, as a sort of artist and in this case also director, I felt like that was a good decision, that I didn't just cordon it off and say, no, I expected it to be American, or no, it should have been British, or no, it should have been Australian. I literally was just like, when I heard her audition, I was like, oh, yeah, like, okay, like, this is not
Never
a bad...
thought of
like,
that before.
well, you see what I mean, Milt? Like, I could have been way too stringent, or I could have just been namby-pamby and left it completely open-ended, and I don't like doing either, you know?
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, very good point.
Yeah. Well, Milt, it's been a super big pleasure, and I only have a few last questions here, if I may. So what would you say... what would you say, in your opinion, is your worst vocal actor's habit, or artist's habit, if you will?
My worst habit. Oh boy. Probably drinking coffee.
Really?
The reason that is because when you're a voice actor and you're in the studio and you tend to drink too much coffee, you go to record and your voice kind of gets this snap, crackle, pop noise to it. You get a lot of mouth noise coming through with that, and then you got to take it out of there.
Yeah.
So I just got a hint from a colleague of mine. Apple juice.
Oh, nice.
Helps a lot with that, he said. So I've been giving it a try.
That's great. That's great. I totally resonate with that too. Like, I've often heard some actors, or not actors, voiceover artists in specificity, and I think newer ones, they'll say, I have all these pops and clicks when I speak, and how do I permanently get rid of 100% of them? And I'm like, you don't. Like, there's some times where pops and clicks and plosives are going to be there, and you have to get in the editing room and do a little bit of finagling here. It doesn't mean that you should just ignore it and use your voice in ways that will constantly produce pops and clicks and, like you said, smacking sounds. But it doesn't, like, anybody who thinks that a voice actor can get into the studio and be devoid of 100% of those is just, I think that's just ludicrous. Like, good luck. You must be more than a consummate professional to be like have 100% accuracy where they're like, I recorded it and then no editing was necessary. I'd be like, really? Wow. Like, are you a good witch or a bad witch? I've never once heard that.
I think that's what you call fantasy.
Good point. You're probably 100% right. Yeah. So this is good. So
because that would also mean you'd have to go through the whole script and never make an intentional, a mistake.
Exactly, right? I do everything on purpose. Yeah. So okay, so what's your worst habit? Okay, but what's one of your best? Do you think actor and artist habits?
Well, I think, and this has just started to develop lately, but 2 or 3 years ago, we took a trip to Alaska. It was the year my wife retired, and we just took the summer off and we hooked up the camper and we drove up the Alaskan highway, spent the summer there. And we took our cat with us. His name is Mr. Snuggles, by the way.
Oh, Mr. Snuggles. I love it. Shout out to Mr. Snuggles.
Yeah.
I've been to Alaska,
so anyway,
by the way,
we're there, and I've never been a big journaler. But I'm thinking, I really want to be able to remember this trip, so I should start to journal. And then I'm thinking, but I don't like to journal. I find journaling boring. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book through Mr. Snuggles' eyes about his trip to Alaska, and we're going to make sure that we put history and facts and all of that into the book so that, geez, kids read it, they learn something.
I like that.
And so I did that, and I self-published it, and I did my audiobook of it and self-published that, which got me into this whole thing of going, wow, I really don't need to do other people's projects. If I don't have them, I can do my own.
I love it. Completely concur.
I can come up with things that I'm really good at because I know I'm really good at it, and I can put them together. So that's what I'm working on right now. I've got a project. It's called Ancient Words, actually, which is, it kind of comes out of the COVID pandemic situation where people just need to have some hope and relaxation and all of that. And so I went through and collected a whole bunch of scripture verses that speak to that. A friend of mine put together the music for it, and so we're in the process of finishing that up and getting that out there and seeing where it goes, and hopefully there's a lot of people that can be helped by that.
I love it. And we'll have links in the description for Milt's project there. And also I'll put up some images that we can share throughout this video.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
definitely. And we'll see you next time on Diamond Discussions. Thanks for watching. Would you like to be a guest on the show, or do you know a diamond in the rough who should? Contact us, DiamondDragonsTale@gmail.com. Until then, Chiong, Chifoy, Vas Res, and Iyayalaha.